Okay, so let's see here. A couple of questions came in over the break. So now we'll just do totally open Q&A. I'm going to close a little bit of the blinds behind me just to make it easier on the camera. I'm actually replacing that camera. There's a brand new one coming. My wife happened to see one of my streams and she saw that I have like a USB webcam over there. And it kind of struggles with picking up the right lights, so I'm getting a brand new Sony for over there, which will be kind of nice. The Wilfred asked during the break, on what floor is your apartment? I get that you want to take a gun and shoot me because of all the things that I say about SQL Server, but I don't give out that kind of stuff just because I've actually had stalkers. I've had people come and like track me down during conferences and track down the hotels that I'm staying at, but it's up in the 20s and 30s. Christian says, cool playlist. Which one is it? I use Pretzel app. So Pretzel.rocks has PodSafe music where it just costs $6 a month and you can put it in as part of podcasts and streams and all that. Whereas, other people make other recommendations for music and whatnot, but it's so tricky in terms of rights and who's allowed to produce what on different broadcasts. And if you put a copyrighted piece of music in on your stream, places like YouTube will actually yank your stream down with no notice. Khaled says, I use triggers heavily until I heard Panal say, and I love Panal, he's fantastic, brilliant, we have a great time together. He said, don't use triggers. He recommended them replacing them with a scheduled task every 5 minutes or so to do the same work. Do you hate triggers as well? I love triggers for reinforcing business logic in an emergency. If someone ships code, and don't worry if your chat message disappears, I've got them all here on my handy dandy list, right? You can actually see it right here as they go by. So I'll go through them in time. I love triggers when someone ships code and we go, oh my God, we've got to add some business logic and we don't have a whole lot of time. You can inject it in triggers. It's just like technical debt though. When you implement that, you're basically guaranteeing that you can't scale past a certain level. Now the level is pretty high. So folks like us who are performance tuned in with who do a whole lot of performance tuning type work, trying to help people get to really crazy scales, triggers end up causing backfires for stuff. So I end up not recommending those. I'm okay with putting them in. I love them for certain things like auditing changes, but it's just technical debt that you want to go back and revisit at some point in time. So somebody said, I want to say it was Surly Dev said, hey, you should change the chat that you do. Let me tweak one thing about it, because right now, the way that I've got it embedded in the stream, it disappears after 15 seconds. I'm just going to change that so that it doesn't hide after 15 seconds. And then I will go through and change the chat so that it goes and refreshes. Just a second here. Let me go find where the heck this thing is. There it is. And then refresh cache. Okay. And several questions came in all in a stream there in a second. So I'm going to go, now they should just stick around after they go through. A couple other questions. Shashank asks, advice on learning SQL Teradata. I don't do Teradata, so you totally got me there. Adrian on YouTube says, any tips for regular troubleshooting of SQL Server CPU peaks? I have a server with 20 databases. I can't seem to catch the culprit as to which is pushing CPU. SQL Server doesn't track usage directly by database because you can have cross-database queries. You can run a query in tempDB that accesses objects in several other databases. So what you want to use instead is SP-Blitz Cache. SP-Blitz Cache will let you go sort the top 10 offenders by CPU, for example. That's SP-Blitz Cache. Richard says, on YouTube, Richard says, do you use Query Store much? I use it, but it's got a slightly not completely baked feeling about it. Tracy Baggiano has raised an Azure item on it, for example. So I have this love-hate feeling with Query Store. When it came out, I loved the idea that it exists. In practice, I've had it bring down client servers repeatedly. So the problem with Query Store is that if you have a lot of ad hoc queries, a lot of unparameterized queries, specifically if you have tens of thousands of unparameterized queries per hour, it can drive Query Store to like 100% CPU. It can even cause problems on cluster failovers. So it's one of those things that I want to believe I just haven't found a use case where I'm ready to recommend it to the public yet. I used to evangelize it. I used to have it as part of SP Blitz's checks and SP Blitz First. I would warn people if they didn't have Query Store installed. I used to warn people in SQL Constant Care. But just after it brings down people's servers, I have a tough time recommending that. It's really challenging. Jedi Mind Grill says, are you a fan of linked servers, or is it really that big of a security risk? If you search for, I'm going to pop over and switch desktops. If you search for Connor Cunningham distributed SQL bits, so SQL Query Store, or SQL Query Store. So SQL Bits is a conference out in the UK that records all their sessions, puts them online. Connor Cunningham is one of the architects of the Query Optimizer. Used to be an architect of the Query Optimizer. These days, I think he's moved on to something else in Azure, but still just a brilliant man. And he lays out the problems with distributed queries, why they don't perform very well, all that good stuff. So search for Connor Cunningham distributed SQL Bits, and you can watch the whole session online. Coming back over to here, abuse system, yep. So early dev says featured chat works great if someone is queuing up questions for you. Yeah, you viewers are so lazy, and I can't get you to volunteer for things. That's not true. I've just never tried. Santee asks, will there be a difference if there was a sample stats update done? Be more specific with your question about what will there be a difference be. Abraham says, hi, Brent. Good morning. What do you think about in-memory OLTP? I think it's hot garbage. CheckDB doesn't work for in-memory OLTP. That's my starting point. In-memory OLTP has all kinds of problems with database startup. I have never seen a problem where in-memory OLTP was the right answer. I have no doubt that out there someone has found a situation where in-memory OLTP is the right answer. But every single time that a client has come to me and said, hey, I'm looking for in-memory OLTP help, we've looked at the system and in-memory OLTP has been entirely the wrong answer. Nimat says, can we use the missing index report to apply for database? Does it help speed up the process? Yes, I teach about that in my class, Fundamentals of Index Tuning and Mastering Query Tuning. I teach you how to run those. Shurish Kumar says, hi, Brent, could you post a session about SQL Big Data Cluster? I don't, and I never will. Not that they're bad. It's just that you got to pick the things that you're good at. Big Data Clusters combines a bunch of things that almost no one is good at. Linux, Kubernetes, a new feature in SQL Server 2019, querying out to Oracle, Teradata, all these other things. I just don't know anybody who's good at it. Now, the one person I know who's good at it, damn it, why can't I remember his name? Oh, we're friends on Instagram. It drives me crazy. But if you search for SQL Server Big Data Cluster blog, there's one blogger out there who's doing it and posting videos about it, even on YouTube. But I never will. Just will never happen. Because you got to pick your winners, right? I got to pick the things that I'm going to be good at and I'm going to teach y'all about. I'm not going to get good at running SQL Server on Linux and Kubernetes containers. It's just not going to happen. David on YouTube asks, is there a way to calculate the optimal percentage to update stats? Yep, 100%. Moving on. Now, of course, Brent, you're joking. Updating stats with 100% full scan is hard. It takes a long time. So anything less than 100% is a compromise. It's going to run faster, but you're going to get crappy stats. And it just comes down to how crappy of stats your application is able to tolerate and how weird your data is. Matt says, is there a significant overhead in splitting monolithic stored proc logic out until smaller procs for maintainability? And when you say overhead, it's all going to depend on the code and how much time you have to do it. So it depends. I've seen great written large stored procedures. I've seen terrible written stored procedures. It's like asking how long is a piece of string. G. Donfrio says, best tutorial on installing and configuring SQL Server 2017 clusters on premise. So the problem is with clusters is that clustering and availability groups changed so much every year for the past 5 years. There was a clustering expert out there, Alan Hurt. The guy runs SQLHA.com. So if you search for SQLHA.com, back in 2011, Alan said, I'm going to bring out a book on clusters and availability groups, and he took money for it, and it's even still for sale, and he's never actually shipped it. And I don't blame him, because the technology changes so fast. 2012, 2014, 16, 17, 19, every one of these years, Microsoft has changed the way that clusters are really built and explained, and Linux and Windows and Kubernetes and all this kind of stuff. So the technology is changing faster than the documentation can keep up. So what you want to do is just go hit the built-in product documentation. You're not going to find third-party people who do a great job of building training material on it because it changes so fast. There's not an ROI in me sitting around and building training on it because the length of time it'll take me to build the training, the product will have already changed and my revenue won't make sense. So just go read the documentation instead. Microsoft is the only company who can afford to lose money building documentation. Next up, VTOL Freak. Okay, yep. So let's see. Richard says, Query Store, were the issues down to capture mode? No. Even on auto, I've seen it bring down servers. Jedi Mind Gorilla says trying to P2V our clusters. I would never P2V a cluster. I would build new clusters over in VMware Hyper-V instead. Because so many of your cluster drivers, stuff like I/O drivers, network drivers, all that are going to be so different between VMs and physical and I really want to be able to test failovers back and forth before I go live. That's why I'd want to build a brand new clusters over in VMware or Hyper-V, and then load test the bejesus out of them, failing over back and forth. Adrian on YouTube asks, does it make sense to run index maintenance daily on a data warehouse? What? Oh, Carlos, hello, welcome to the club. Thank you, I appreciate the subscription, that's very cool. Adrian says, I had to take a deep breath and reread Adrian's questions. Adrian says, does it make sense to run index maintenance daily on a data warehouse that is rebuilt from scratch nightly? Whoever thought that a data warehouse being rebuilt nightly was a good idea? Dude, your problem isn't index maintenance. Your problem is whoever built that data warehouse. That is insane. Reloading it from scratch every night, that's called a Groundhog Day data warehouse. So that's your bigger problem, not index maintenance. Chandu says, is this Q&A? No, it's just a bunch of A's. Next up we have Suresh says, to join your mastering performance tuning class, do I need to have good T-SQL skills or will just the basics of it be fine? What you do is take the fundamentals classes first. So take fundamentals of index tuning, fundamentals of query tuning, fundamentals of parameter sniffing. Then you can move on to the mastering classes. Let's see here. Next up, David's up on YouTube. Follow up on the stats. Says the trouble is that the table is massive and it takes ages to complete a full scan. Well, maybe you should buy storage that's at least as fast as my iPad. Now, I'm joking, of course, but that's how that works. Adrian, I know you, Adrian. Hey, good to see you, Adrian. Thank you for subscribing. Jedi Mike Gorilla, that's fine. Nishant says, T-SQL techniques for Spark programming in Databricks. I have a feeling that you just reached out for random keywords and you're just playing buzzword bingo. I would like to build pancakes with JavaScript on AWS. You're just randomly. Seriously, so the problem is when you play buzzword bingo, when you grab the latest and greatest keywords, just random stuff, you're not going to find anybody who has any training about it because it changes all the time. I want pancakes too. The Surly Dev says we have a cube that is updated nightly and refreshed totally once a week. Yeah, you were young and you needed the money. Malik says CheckDB with physical only, is it good? It's not as good as the full-blown CheckDB, but it's a start. RJ says, what are your thoughts on Azure SQL DB versus on-premises? I love Azure SQL DB if you don't have a DBA. Microsoft is much better of a DBA than not having a DBA at all. Microsoft does a much better job at backups, patching, high availability, disaster recovery than not having a DBA at all. Now you pay for it. It's expensive, although it's not as expensive as having a DBA. So it's kind of a flip up there. Richard says, any new thoughts on letting the UK folk buy your courses? UK has their own law that's identical to the GDPR, unfortunately, so it doesn't make any difference. Even though you've left, the whole Brexit thing, I would love to say here's a shining light that's a part of that. Unfortunately, you still have basically the same thing. I'm working towards GDPR compliance. We're just not there yet. Nishant asked the same question again. Nishant, the hell is wrong with you? Listen. Scrolling back a little further, VTOL Freak. Oh, this is such a good question. VTOL Freak says, will the automatic indexing feature ever come on premises, or will that stay an Azure exclusive? So the way that they're doing automatic index tuning up in the cloud is there, and you can read the documentation. They say this. I'm not telling you anything secret. Is they capture your exact workload in Azure SQL DB, and then they replay it somewhere else, doing experiments on the indexing. Well, if that comes down on premises, where are they going to do the automatic testing? Where are they going to run these tests at? Because they can't do it over in the production box. So I don't know that they're ever going to be able to bring that down on premises until they implement some kind of idle job type thing. Because remember, they're changing the database when they're doing this kind of thing. I think that's going to be the kind of feature that they keep up in the cloud versions, at least for the foreseeable future. Ringazine says, I'm awaiting the email saying now GDPR compliant, I will buy everything. See, the trick with that, though, is that I have some stuff up in Gumroad. Like I have the consultant toolkit, and I've done classes internationally every now and then, and y'all don't buy as much as you say you do. Y'all are like, Europeans are like, I have all the money in the world. I'm ready now. And then I bring it out, and you're like, I'm busy. I'm like, okay, yeah, whatever. Santi says, a small talk on indexed views in SQL Server would be really helpful. Unfortunately, SQL Server has a lot of restrictions, like no subqueries. Yeah, the subqueries aren't really what they're for. Indexed views are really for aggregating performance features. I'll show you a demo. So let's hop over into Management Studio, and I'm going to close out all my other queries. How can I start tuning SSAS? I actually don't know, because I don't know anybody who's using SSAS. It's nothing against analysis services. It's just one of those niche products that not a whole lot of people use. And I mean, I know people using it. I don't know people performance tuning it. So your best bet there is probably to go call a consultant. Not me, but somebody who specializes in that. All right, so let's go over the Stack Overflow database. And I'm going to start by dropping all my indexes. And then I'm going to say select, I'm going to design a query that I want first. I'm going to say, show me, I'm going to group together votes. At Stack Overflow, there's a votes table, and it holds exactly what you think it holds. It holds all kind of votes that were cast on different posts, so people can do up votes, down votes, etc. I'm going to say, go count up the number of votes that were done per month. Show me like voting trends per month. So I'm going to say, select year creation date, month creation date, count star as total votes from DBO votes, group by, and I'm going to copy paste these two out, copy paste, order by, paste those two out. And then we'll call this as a creation date year, and then as creation date month. So if I don't have any indexes, this is going to suck pretty bad, because that table is a little bit on the large side, the votes table. So if I go in and I look at the votes table and I look at storage, so this thing's about 5 gigs in terms of size, but it's got 150 million rows in it. Well, doing grouping and aggregating on 150 million rows is going to suck pretty bad. If I go and execute this query and you watch my CPU while this thing runs, the CPU is no bueno. My CPU is banging up against the roof as it goes through and calculates sums across 150 million rows. Now you can index for this, and it's still not going to help. I can say, for example, create index, creation date, includes, and actually I don't even need an include, on DBO votes, creation date, If I do a regular old non-clustered index, so this thing finished, it finished after 37 seconds, but the 37 seconds isn't even really the whole story. The bigger story for me is how much CPU time this thing used. So if I say set statistics time on, and then I go run the exact same query again, when this query finishes, over on the Messages tab, you're going to see how much CPU he used, but he used 4 CPUs solid for 37 seconds straight. That's going to suck pretty bad. Or now that cache is primed up, he does it for 12 seconds straight. So let's look at the amount of CPU time that he burned. He burned 46 seconds. So I'm going to put this over here in chat. So with clustered index only, here's how much time it used. Now, let's go through and add a regular plain old non-clustered indexes, or plain old non-clustered index on the votes table. David, if you go, the only place that UK folks can buy my content, the only thing that they can buy is a consultant toolkit. So go to brentozar.com and click consulting up at the top, then the consultant toolkit, and you can buy it from there. So this takes some time, of course, in order to create this index. But all the index is a narrower copy of the table. It's just only got creation date and the vote ID on there. So as we scan through the whole thing in order, it's still going to be an epic ton of CPU in order to accomplish this query. So as this thing finishes, because it's going to take some time in order to build this index, I'm going to write up an indexed view. So an indexed view, create or alter view, DBO, and I'm going to put a go in here. Create or alter view, I'm going to say votes by date with schema binding as, okay, good. The index creation finished. Let's go back and try our query again. So before it was taking around about 12 seconds, but the ugly part was how much CPU time it was doing. It was doing like 37 seconds worth of CPU time. Look at our time here. It still sucks. The time to do this is still really hard work. Building up all of this data around by date is absolutely terrible. So the index alone doesn't get you across the finish line, but the indexed view can. So here's my view as select year creation date, as creation date year, month creation date as creation date month, count big, mean old SQL Server makes us do that. Welcome to the club, actually, as total votes. And I'm just going to go copy out that exact same syntax, copy and paste, go. So this just creates the view. A view is just, whoopsie, I don't need an order by inside there. A view is just syntactical sugar that makes your life easier when you're querying something. If I go back and I run my query again, if I go look at just the estimated plan, he is still scanning the index on creation date. This view hasn't helped anything yet so far. But if I index the view, create unique clustered index CL on DBO votes by date, creation date year, creation date month. If I go create a unique clustered index on the view, now this is going to take some time because what it's doing is it's actually writing this view to disk permanently. It's just like an index. So now that I have it on disk, if I'm lucky, if I've been living my life right, I can go run this select, and yes, look at that. CPU time is zero. Because now SQL Server, instead of having to hit the underlying tables, it's just hitting the indexed view. Now, what's incredible about this is that I didn't have to change my query to point to the view. That's right. I've created a brand new view down here and an index on the view, but as far as my users are concerned, they're still querying the base table. Now, there are all kinds of gotchas around indexed views. Like, you really want to read the documentation on them. There's a huge epic list of things you can't do. The one that catches me all the time is no self joins. But when they're this much of a savior, when they make this much of a difference in terms of performance, I will take the restrictions all day long. These things are phenomenal, just magical. Now, they have the same price as an index. The more indexes that you add, the slower your inserts, updates, and deletes will go. But for specific reporting situations, just phenomenal. All right, let's come back over here to the chat and tackle some of the other questions. Botsko says, one probably stupid question. They're all stupid questions. Because we're on 2012 now, we need to upgrade. Can we install 2019 and continue to use the databases in 2012 compat mode? Yes, just make sure that your vendors are okay, like any databases that you have are actually being okay on 2019, because there are functionality changes. Let's see here. Santi says, it works wonders when a query is doing aggregation, but the biggest problem I face is when I have subqueries. Yeah, but subqueries I have no idea what the subqueries are doing, dude. That's why you go to performance tuning classes. Come on now. Surly Dev says, wait, what? An index view can improve a select from a table even if the select isn't looking at the view, but the same underlying table? Yes. Man, fantastic. And there are a lot of gotchas around with that, all kinds of gotchas around the version. Like Carson says, it depends on the version you're using. Even beyond that, even on enterprise, there are all kinds of gotchas. So you really got to read the documentation, but it's fantastic. Manny from YouTube says, can you explain about include clauses in non-clustered indexes? Go to my free class, How to Think Like the Engine. Search for Brent Ozar, How to Think Like the Engine, and I use actual pieces of paper to explain how indexes work, how includes work, and much more stuff than that. Thanks, Mutant Amoeba. That's a cool name, Mutant Amoeba. That's actually kind of awesome. Diaconera says, what t-shirt size are you? I'm in between a large and an extra large. So it depends. Like I'm not a terribly skinny fellow. It's hard to tell by this angle, but plus I'm like 6'3", so I'm really weird teetering on the extra large versus large. If it's a free shirt from like your company, then could you send me both, a large and an extra large? I know it sounds greedy, but then if you're just sending me one personally, I totally appreciate it. That's very sweet of you. Just an extra large is fine. Chandu says, this is a basic question. How can I practice this? Well, do it. You do it. You download it and you do it. Right? It's like practicing anything else. Surly Dev says, this is some next level stuff. Got to remotch and make some proper notes. Yeah, if it's free, I want to. Exactly. Well, the only reason I say that is sometimes shops will send me like extra large shirts and they look like a tent, like I could swim in it. And I'm like, dude, I'm never going to wear this. It looks like I'm wearing a sail. Red Barrett says, when are the Brent Ozar shirts coming? They're already out. If you go to my Twitch channel, they're totally already there. So we'll go over to twitch.tv/Brent Ozar. And if you go to brentozar.com and click on the Twitch icon up top, this is going to be weird because it's actually going to show me there. I just want to make sure I'm muted there. Here I am. It's like a thing in time. You scroll down in here and there's my gear. I have like hoodies, coffee, mugs, all kinds of stuff. So close out of there. Coming back over to here. Chandu says, where can I get data and stuff? Go to brentozar.com. Go to brentozar.com, and I got all kinds of stuff for you that's totally free. G Surgeon, good to see you again, says, I recently set a database to compat level, as a result, I had to leave the legacy CE. Performance got worse because rewriting the code. So what I do with most folks when people go to newer versions of SQL Server, most of the time I go the opposite way. What I do is I leave the database at an older compat level, and then when I find a query that gets dramatically better performance on the newer CE, I hint the newer CE. Only because I usually get, in my experience, most of them get worse and only a few of them get better. But if you hit the other way around, if you went to the new CE and you're hinting the old CE on queries, you can leave that in place as long as you want. It's not urgent. It's totally fine. And the cool thing about that, the reason why I really like those hints is because Microsoft is constantly working to make the new version better. Why rework the code to get it to work on today's 2017 or 2019 if it's only going to get better in the future? Just bide your time. And eventually, you're probably just going to be able to yank the hint out and things will be fine. Jedi Mind Gorilla says the family's waking up and the coffee's cold. Good to see you as always, too. Always excellent to see you. Manny says, what do you suggest while moving from Windows T-SQL to Linux T-SQL? The T-SQL doesn't change. The bigger question I'd ask is, what's the problem you're trying to solve? What do you think is going to be better over on Linux than it was on Windows? Because what's worse is not all the features are supported, and it's harder to get support. Bruno says, I have some problems moving jobs to Azure SQL using Task Schedule. Yeah, anytime you're doing scheduled jobs, you really want to step back and rethink how you're going to do them when you move to the cloud. Azure Functions are, I think, a much better solution for things like scheduled tasks. Manny says, if there are stored procedures with lots of different conditions, I don't understand what the question is. So if you can phrase it to the in the form of a question, that would be great. Okay, Manny continues. Do we need to create indexes for all conditions? Oh, Manny, go watch my totally free class, How to Think Like the Engine. So search for Brent Ozar, How to Think Like the SQL Server Engine. It's a totally free class, and I explain the starters of how you design indexes for different scenarios, and then I go get you started on other things along the way. Welcome, R. Duclos. Good to see you. Let's see if there's any others that I missed. Scrolling back. Anything else that was back? Let's see here. A couple of folks saying they bought questions from Udemy, and they said, Mr. Robot says, I bought questions from Udemy, but they weren't helpful. That's kind of been my experience with all stuff on Udemy. Like, it's $5 and it's $5 for a reason. Namat says, David says, when is the fundamentals of parameter sniffing? Tomorrow. Starts tomorrow morning. Namat says, I migrated from, Akash, thank you. I appreciate it. Very cool. Yay. Let's see. Namat says, I migrated from SQL Server 2008. Tables have more than 150 columns. Any suggestions on speeding up the process? Sure, absolutely. Consulting. But yeah, that's exactly what I do for a living. Oh, thank you, Abuse Sysadmin. I appreciate it. And Spitfire, you're just now following me? What the hell? So Abuse Sysadmin, thank you. I appreciate that. Manoj says, is there any way to identify which stored procedures or views are using hard-coded stuff like in a where clause? The bigger thing I'd say is, what's the problem you're trying to solve? You know, what is the issue that you're trying to solve, and go from it that way. Don't go looking for problems. Sometimes when people learn about a problem, it feels like they just got a hammer and they're walking around looking for nails like they're going to go beat on something. Don't take the hammer and go looking for nails. Go Surly Dev, that's a good point. Now, go instead say, what's the problem you're trying to solve from a business perspective? If it's slow queries, go find slow queries. All right, let's see here. Bruno says, thank you. We're thinking about Azure Functions, Azure Jobs, Elastic Jobs, Logic Apps. Yeah, you're right. With all the options, it is hard to choose. The thing that I think has the most legs, the most long-term worth, is Azure Functions. And the reason why I believe so much that that has legs is that it's a great competitor to AWS Lambda. AWS Lambda is amazing. Everything for SQL Constant Care was built entirely on Amazon Lambda, and it's the best decision we've ever made. It's just absolutely fantastic. Azure Functions is Amazon's competitor to that, and I haven't used Azure Functions even once, but given how good Lambda is, I would bet my farm on Azure Functions. Task scheduler, stuff like that, Elastic Jobs, Step Jobs, I think they were only temporary stopgap things until Microsoft could build Azure Functions. But now that they built it, I'd bet my horse there. And it's cheap as hell because you just pay by the millisecond that your query runs or that your code runs. Khalid says, Eric Darling published good stuff on having multiple tempDB files sized equally. Is it better to have multiple files rather than for one tempD for user databases? So if you download my SQL Server setup guide, and I'm going to show you how to get it. So if you go to brentozar.com, just brentozar.com, nothing else, and then up at the top, you click on scripts. Just click on the word scripts itself. Up there, it's got my first responder kit, and it's got the SQL Server setup checklist inside there. I tell you how to set up tempDB, for example. And Eric and I totally agree. We're 100% on exactly the same page. That's how you set up tempDB. How you set up user databases really is much more involved. Generally speaking, if it's less than a terabyte, don't worry about it. As it gets up over a terabyte, it starts to matter about the way that your storage is configured. What kind of storage you have? Are you in the cloud? Do you have multiple underlying spindles? Do you have groups of spindles? Is it a shared pool? And so forth. That, of course, is way more complex than I can give guidance on just generally speaking, but this at least gets you started on tempDB, which is pretty much a universal piece. And Chandu says we use Azure functions. Yeah, very cool. Adrian says, running SQL on a virtual machine, does it make any difference if tempDB is on the C drive? Yes, because users can fill up tempDB. Any yo-yo can go create a table and screw you. If you want to talk about a denial of service attack that brings down your server, just somebody dumping stuff into a temp table can bring your server down if it's on the C drive. Wah, wah, wah. Let's see here. Mr. Robot says, sometimes when I create an index, it speeds things down. Doesn't it mean I need to have one index that covers all queries? No, watch my How to Think Like the Engine class. You're at a great point where you're ready to start digesting the stuff inside How to Think Like the Engine, and then you'll be able to understand what's going on with indexes. Manny says, a temp table or a table variable, which one is better? Oh, I'll show you. So let's switch over here, and I'm going to go drop my indexes again just so I can start from scratch. Then I'm going to ask SQL Server. I'm going to say create, well, we'll start with, let's do a fun demo. So let's say I have create procedure DBO, well, we'll say create or alter because I'm going to change it a few times. Create or alter proc DBO USP search users by location. And I'm going to say location. That's a crappy way of doing it. Let's do this. Create table locations, location name, and varchar spectral spark. Welcome to the club. 100. Insert into locations, location name, values, London, United Kingdom. I'm going to go insert that in and then select star from DBO or from locations, L, inner join DBO users, U, on L location equals U location. Morning. Order by U display name. So then I'm going to say just U. So what I'm telling SQL Server to do is go create a table with and put London United Kingdom inside there. You know what? I'm also going to create an index. Create an index location on DBO users location. Big Mike, oh, good to see you. You Rock Biter. Where's the name Rock Biter come from? That's an interesting name to have. So now I'm going to create an index on location. Then once that's done, here's the main bulk of the demo. I'm going to go create a table. I'm going to put a row into it. Then I'm going to have SQL Server go pull stuff. Never ending story. Oh, nice. I'm going to pull stuff out of the temp table. What the key is, how SQL Server makes an execution plan is all going to depend on whether or not he understands what London United Kingdom is. Let's go run this and see what his execution plan looks like. Oops, I forgot to turn on the actual plan there. Let's go drop that table. Drop table if exists. Locations. Get you out of here. All right. Damn it, I still didn't put in the actual execution plan. There we go. So here is the big fun of the tempDB demo. With the tempDB demo, SQL Server said, I'm going to start by, SQL Server always has a guy's voice because he's dumb and stubborn and he refuses to ask for directions. He's all, trust me, I got this, when he doesn't usually got this. He says, okay, I'm going to start by looking at this temp table here. I believe there's going to be one row in it, and I think I know how many people I'm going to find in London, United Kingdom. Because what he knows about this influences what he thinks he's going to find in here. This is a beautiful execution plan. Mwah! Because SQL Server understood exactly how many users he thought was going to come out, and going over further over here, this sort, SQL Server understood how many rows were going to be sorted, so he appropriately budgeted the amount of RAM. There's nothing in here about spilling to disk. Now, I'm going to do the same exact thing, but with a table variable. Here, I'm going to say declare at locations table, insert into it, and then I'm going to select from it. Same exact thing, but I'm using a table variable instead of Hunter. Thank you. I appreciate that. That's very kind of you. Always nice when I get subscribes. Very cool. So now I'm going to do the same exact thing, but I'm going to use a table variable. Welcome to the club, Bob. So let's go over and look at the execution plan, and oh, that's not so good. Oh, now we have lots of problems inside here. So SQL Server goes, I think I'm going to have one row inside this table variable. I have no idea what it's going to be. It's a variable. It's in the name. It could vary. Who knows what it could be? So I think I'm just going to find, 65 people in London. And he's completely wrong. And then, of course, this has a problem when it comes time to do that sort. SQL Server also didn't allocate enough memory in order to do this sort. So the table variable ends up spilling to disk. Now that's bad, but it gets worse. So it gets even worse because what happens when I put multiple rows into here? What happens if I also, for example, say India and United States? So early dev, I would love to do that, but my voice breaks out when I do that. I did an entire session at the past summit once with Bob, the hell's the name? Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan's voice. I tried to do the whole session in Bob Dylan's voice, and it was only a lightning talk, which is just like 6 minutes long, and my voice was totally shot by the end of it. It was really funny. It was I had a harmonica and everything and a wig. It was really cool. So now I'm going to try the same thing, except I'm going to do 3 rows instead of 1. Now, the temp table, if I go look at the temp table version, the temp table version is, again, pretty good. SQL Server knew there were going to be 3 rows coming out of the temp table. Then, he didn't estimate perfectly, but his estimates were at least pretty good. Yeah, I like doing that a lot too as well. Now, if I look over here, SQL Server allocated enough RAM in order to do the sort. We're all good. But now, let's try that exact same thing over with a table variable version instead. So let's switch over into here and do this insert. Welcome to the club, Mokoko. So now, I'm going to insert 3 locations into here and see what happens over with this. So, hey SQL Server, how many rows do you think you're going to find in this table variable? 1. Variables, they just have 1 row in them. So then, of course, his estimates are now even more insane. He thought he was only going to find 65 rows. There were like 85,000. And so now when it comes time to do that sort, of course, he ends up spilling lots of tables lots of pages to disk. So this totally blows table variables. They have bad estimates, just a hot mess. So Microsoft was all excited. They're like, look, no, seriously, we figured out how to fix this in 2019. Things are going to be way better. So in order to fix it, I'm running 2019, mind you. In order to fix it, I got to right-click on my database and go into Properties. I go into Options, and I'm going to change my compat level from 2017 to 2019. This is where Microsoft, so much better. Oh, it's amazing now. Oh, no. Table variables. We totally get it. We screwed up. We're going to do it the right way. Now, before I do it, as a quick reminder, here are the problems with table variables. Number 1, SQL Server incorrectly estimated how many rows were going to come back. It only thought 1 row was going to come back. In reality, 3 rows came back. Plus, the estimate of how many rows he thought he'd find per location was completely smoking crack. Let's see how that works now. Now I'm in 2019. Let's run the exact same query again without touching it. And ta-da! Suddenly, SQL Server knows that there are 3 rows in the table variable. That's amazing, right? Well, actually, no, it totally sucks. Because if you look down here at this was the problem that we were hitting all along. It underestimated how many rows were going to be found out of the related index seek, because SQL Server has no idea what the contents of table variables are, and as a result, he still spilled this thing to tempDB. So that's all bad. Again, it's another nail in the coffin of table variables. You just do not want to use table variables. But there's one case where you actually might want to use table variables. So here, I've got a simple go declare a table variable. Dang, I'm nowhere near it. Yes, it's true. Welcome to the club, Zeb. So here, I'm doing a declare. I'm inserting 3 rows out, and I'm getting a select. Okay, nothing hidden up my sleeves. I do an execute. 3 rows come back. Let's now say begin tran and commit. So as a quick question, when I run this, how many rows are going to come back? It's not a trick question, just how many rows are going to come back from this. I'll let y'all answer there. Y'all are afraid. You don't know. Okay. So Northern Canuck is the only one who's brave enough to say a number of rows. The rest of y'all are terrified. Come on, y'all. You know how begin trans and commits work. You hit execute and you get 3 rows back. Hey, Paulus, welcome to the club. Thank you. I appreciate the subscription. Gabriel says 6. Gabriel, you need to report in for training. Shashank, no, y'all need some basic work on transactions. So in here, so I did a declare and begin tran and a commit. 3 rows went in, 3 rows come out. That's how begin trans and commits work. Now, how about a rollback? If I do the same exact thing and I do a rollback instead of the commit, how many rows are going to come back out of here now? We'll see what y'all say.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right, so let's go see what you say. So some folks are saying 3, some folks are saying 0. Some people say 0. All kinds of confusion. Let's execute it and table variables ignore transactions. Just like everything else that's a variable ignores transactions. If I say declare my name and varchar 30 equals Brent Ozar, and then I say in here set my name equals Bob Dylan, and then run it, select star, and then I'll also select my name and go execute. See how it says Bob Dylan even though I did a rollback? Variables ignore transactions. So if you didn't know this, this is another nail in the coffin of why you do not want to be using table variables. They ignore transactions, so the behavior that you're used to seeing with begin, tran, and commit wouldn't work. Surly Dev says, but a temp table would use a transaction correctly. Yeah, let's go see. Select star from locations. Then in here we'll say begin tran and commit. Well, actually, we'll do the rollback. So we'll tab this out and then say select star, and now, yay! That works absolutely as designed. Welcome to the club. So again, this is another nail in the coffin of why you probably don't want to be using table variables. So we'll switch back over here for a second. So Gawabunga says, so why do we deprecate table variables then? Why do we keep table variables along? And Vasil, I'm not going to answer that one during this webcast just because I don't have enough time to do it justice. But Gawabunga says, why do we keep table variables around? So let me tell you something. You know how at your office, your manager comes in and your manager says things like, hey, can you build a proof of concept of something? Because our main competitor has this other feature and we want this feature, but we don't have it. Can you just build a proof of concept? And then you work late one weekend and you build the proof of concept and you go, well, all right, here's the deal. Here's the proof of concept of it, but you got to promise me that we're not going to go live with this. This is only a proof of concept. I made this out of chewing gum and duct tape. And your boss takes it and goes, thanks, we're going to put it in the next version exactly as is. Bye. Well, you know how you go back and you're like, please give me time to rewrite it. It needs to be fixed. It's not right. And your boss is like, sorry, we got this other thing we need you to work on now. Well, Microsoft is the same way. Microsoft has to ship features because people like Oracle have it. They're like, Java, Oracle has Java in the database. Quick, we gotta stop Oracle. Put Java in our database. And so Microsoft builds a proof of concept of something. We have Java inside the database now. Do you think it performs worth a damn or is reliable? Probably not. But they just need to check a box with feature compatibility with Oracle, just like they did with table variables. And so it's a feature that technically works. You just really don't want to ship and rely your own code on it. Like G-Surgeon says, it's a permanent prototype. Really, anytime you see a feature drop in a new version of SQL Server, you want to think of it as that permanent prototype. Something that just randomly, Nikon, we're going to have a discussion here in a second. Something that just randomly happens to ship doesn't mean it's a good idea for you to put out into production. So Nikon, one thing that I'm going to warn you about, and this will be the last thing that I'll tell y'all before we bail. Never, ever, 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 ever state a fact in a chat. Don't state a fact in a chat. What you want to do instead is say, my friend told me. A friend of mine said that TVPs are great because the operator lets me pass in a bunch of things. So that way when you're wrong, that way, when you're wrong, you don't look like an idiot. Yeah, Ringazine says it's another great one. I read a blog post about. I want y'all to look smart. I don't want you to look stupid. So it's really important that you remember, anytime you're getting ready to state a fact, it never came from you. It was always a friend of mine said, or I read a blog post about. That way, instead of when I prove how you're wrong, I don't pull your pants down in chat. I pull your friend's pants down, and you can laugh about it while your face is turning red because at least you're not on the webcam. All right, so we are at 8 o'clock in the morning in San Diego. My coffee shop downstairs is going to open up here shortly. I've already placed an order online so that my bagel will be ready for me and my pour-over will be ready for me when I go downstairs. I hope that y'all had a wonderful time hanging out this morning. I always enjoy stuff like that. This is amazing. We have 97 people in Twitch. That's just kind of baller. More people over in YouTube, Facebook, and all that. So it's always fun hanging out with y'all and having these kinds of chats. So I'm going to go head out now, go have breakfast. I hope y'all enjoy your Monday, and I will see y'all the next time I go do a live stream. Adios, everyone, and I'll see you next time.